Little girl stops Mafia boss's car in the rain. What he finds in her backpack changes everything. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The rain fell hard that Tuesday night. Dalton Merrick's headlights cut through the darkness on Route 47, a lonely stretch of road he'd driven 1,000 times. His mind was elsewhere. Business calls, meetings, numbers, the usual noise that filled his carefully controlled life. Then he saw her, a small figure standing in the middle of the road. Dalton slammed the brakes. The luxury car skidded slightly before stopping just feet away from the child. His heart pounded as the headlights illuminated her fully. A little girl, maybe 9 years old, completely soaked. Her clothes clung to her small frame. Her hair was plastered against her face. One shoe was torn open at the front, revealing scraped skin underneath. Rain mixed with something darker running down her knee, blood diluted by the storm. But what struck Dalton most was her hand. She held it up, not waving, not begging, just raised, like she was stopping traffic, like she had every right to be there. Dalton rolled down his window halfway, rain immediately splattering inside. "Kid, what are you—" "Please," she interrupted. Her voice was small but steady, trembling but determined. "I need help." Dalton's first instinct was to call someone. Police, child services, anyone. This wasn't his problem. He had an early meeting tomorrow. He didn't do this. But something stopped him. It was her eyes. Even through the rain and darkness, he could see them clearly. Wide, scared, but also impossibly brave. The eyes of someone who had learned fear too young and learned to push through it anyway. She clutched a backpack against her chest. The straps were frayed, nearly breaking under its weight. The bag looked older than she did. "Where are your parents?" Dalton asked, already knowing the answer would complicate everything. The girl didn't answer immediately. She just stood there, rain pouring over her, shivering violently. "Please," she repeated. "I don't have time." Dalton glanced at his rearview mirror. Empty road behind, empty road ahead. Just him and this child in the middle of nowhere. He should drive away, call authorities from somewhere safe, let professionals handle it. But then he remembered something. A voice from years ago. A phone call he didn't take. A sister he didn't stop for. Can it wait until tomorrow? Yeah, I guess so. Dalton closed his eyes briefly, pushing the memory down. When he opened them, the girl was still standing there, waiting, hoping. Against every logical instinct, Dalton reached over and unlocked the passenger door. "Get in," he said quietly, "before you freeze out there." The girl hesitated for just a moment, like she was calculating risk, weighing trust against desperation. Then she moved quickly, pulling open the heavy door and climbing inside. The interior light revealed more details. Mud on her clothes, cuts on her hands. The backpack, now resting on her lap, looked impossibly heavy for someone her size. She pulled the door shut and immediately hugged the backpack tighter. "Thank you," she whispered. Dalton turned up the heat. "What's your name?" She looked at him carefully, studying him, deciding how much to reveal. "Brielle," she finally said. "Brielle," Dalton repeated. "I'm Dalton. Now tell me, why were you standing in the rain like that?" Brielle stared straight ahead through the windshield. Rain hammered against the glass in relentless sheets. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible over the storm. "Because I ran out of time." Dalton felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Something was very, very wrong. And despite every wall he'd built around himself for the past 15 years, despite every lesson he'd learned about staying uninvolved, he put the car in drive. Inside the warm car, Brielle sat perfectly still. She didn't relax, didn't lean back, just sat upright, clutching that backpack like it was the only thing keeping her alive. Dalton drove slowly, unsure of where he was even going. The girl hadn't given him a destination yet. "Brielle," he said gently. "Where do you live?" "Near the old factory," she answered. "On Maple Street." Dalton knew the area. Run-down apartments, broken streetlights, the kind of neighborhood people avoided after dark. "What were you doing all the way out here?" Brielle's fingers tightened on the backpack straps. I was looking for someone. Who? Silence. Dalton tried a different approach. What about your parents? Are they home? My mom is, Brielle said quietly. And your dad? The girl turned to look out the window. The rain streaked down the glass in patterns that seemed to match the tension in the car. He left, she said flatly. No emotion, just fact. Dalton felt something twist in his chest. He'd heard that tone before. The voice of a child forced to accept things no child should accept. What about school? He asked. Do you go to school around here? For the first time, Brielle's expression changed slightly. Something that might have been sadness flickered across her face. I miss it sometimes, she whispered. You miss it? You're not going? Brielle didn't answer. Instead, she asked her own question. Do you have kids? The question caught Dalton off guard. No, he said after a moment. I don't. Why not? I was always too busy. Brielle nodded slowly, like that made perfect sense to her. Like she understood exactly what it meant to be too busy for the things that mattered. My mom used to be busy too, Brielle said. She worked at the grocery store, 2 shifts sometimes, but she always made time for me. Used to? Dalton noticed the past tense immediately. Brielle's voice got even quieter. She got sick. She couldn't work anymore. They said she missed too many days. Dalton's grip tightened on the steering wheel. How long has she been sick? I don't know. A while. It got worse after... Brielle stopped herself. After what? After my dad left. The pieces were starting to come together in Dalton's mind, forming a picture he didn't want to see. Brielle, he said carefully, who takes care of you? She turned to look at him directly for the first time. Her eyes were older than they should be. Tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. I take care of us, she said simply. Dalton felt his breath catch. How old are you? 9, almost 10. 9 years old. Taking care of herself and a sick mother. What about other family? Grandparents, aunts, uncles? Brielle shook her head. They live far away. We don't talk to them anymore. Dalton wanted to ask more, but something in Brielle's posture warned him to slow down. She was answering questions, but carefully. Protecting information, guarding secrets. Like someone who'd learned that telling the truth could sometimes make things worse. The backpack, Dalton said, changing subjects. It looks heavy. What's inside? Brielle's entire body tensed. Something important, she whispered. Can I see? No. Her response was immediate and fierce, then softer. I mean, not yet, please. Dalton raised his hand slightly, showing he wouldn't push. Okay. It's your bag. They drove in silence for another minute. The rain was finally starting to ease up. Streetlights appeared in the distance. They were getting close to town. Brielle, Dalton said quietly. Why were you really standing in the rain tonight? She stared ahead at the approaching lights. When she finally spoke, her voice broke just slightly. Because I ran out of time, she repeated. I tried everything else. I did all the things I was supposed to do. But it wasn't enough. And I didn't know what else to do, so I just stood there, hoping someone would stop. Stop for what? Brielle looked down at the backpack in her lap. To help, she whispered, before it's too late. Dalton pulled into a gas station parking lot under a flickering light. He turned to face Brielle fully. The girl was still clutching that backpack like her life depended on it. Brielle, he said gently, I want to help you, but I need to understand what's happening. Please, can you show me what's in the bag? Brielle's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. If I show you, she whispered, you'll think I did something wrong. I won't. I promise. She studied his face for a long moment, looking for lies, looking for judgment. Whatever she saw must have been enough, because slowly, so slowly, she unzipped the backpack. The smell hit Dalton first. Old paper, damp fabric, something metallic and stale. Brielle pulled the bag open wider. Inside were stacks of crumpled bills, 1s, 5s, a few 10s, rubber banded together in messy bundles. The money looked ancient, wrinkled, worn, some bills torn at the edges. But that wasn't all. Underneath the money were papers, medical documents with red stamps that read overdue and final notice. Prescription bottles, half empty, with dates from months ago. And at the very bottom, a piece of notebook paper with careful childish handwriting in purple crayon. "This is for Mommy's medicine. Don't let them take it." Dalton's throat tightened. He reached out slowly and picked up one of the bills. It smelled like rust and mold, like it had been buried somewhere damp. "Brielle," he said carefully, "where did you get all this money?" She wiped her nose with her sleeve. "I earned it." "How?" "I delivered newspapers in the morning before school. Mrs. Chen down the street pays me $5 to walk her dog twice a week. I sold lemonade last summer and—" She hesitated. "And I found some cans and bottles. You can return them for money." Dalton felt something crack inside his chest. This 9-year-old child had been working like an adult, scraping together pennies and nickels. "All for the medicine," he said quietly. Brielle nodded quickly. "Mom needs it, but it's expensive. The pharmacy said we need $347 for the next prescription. I have—" She counted quickly through the bundles. $216. I was so close. But then they said Mom needs to see the doctor first, and that costs even more. And I didn't know what to do, and— Her voice broke. The tears she'd been holding back finally spilled over. "I tried so hard," she sobbed. "I saved every penny. I didn't buy anything for me, not even when my shoes got holes. I just needed enough. Just enough to make her better." Dalton wanted to say something comforting, something helpful, but his voice wouldn't work. He'd spent years building businesses, making millions, living in comfort, and this child had been collecting soda cans to save her mother's life. "Brielle," he finally managed. "Where is your mother right now?" Brielle wiped her eyes with shaking hands. "Home in our apartment. She can't get out of bed anymore." The words hit Dalton like a punch. "Can't get out of bed?" Brielle nodded miserably. "She tries, but she's too weak. She says she just needs rest, but it's been getting worse, and I know—" Her voice dropped to a terrified whisper. "I know she's not getting better." Dalton looked at the money, the papers, the desperate note written in crayon. A 9-year-old child trying to save her dying mother with $200 and pure determination. "Take me to her," Dalton said firmly. "Right now." Brielle's head snapped up. "You'll help?" "Yes." "You promise you won't take the money? Some adults said they'd help before, but then they just—" "I promise," Dalton interrupted. "The money is yours, but your mother needs help that money can't buy. Not alone. Do you understand?" Brielle stared at him with those impossibly old eyes. Then she zipped the backpack closed carefully and held it against her chest. "Maple Street," she said. "Building C, apartment 2F. Dalton put the car back in drive. Neither of them spoke as they headed toward the address. But Dalton's mind was racing. What would he find when they got there? And why did he feel like he was driving towards something that would change everything? Building C looked like it had given up years ago. The paint was peeling. Half the windows were covered with cardboard. A broken gutter hung at a dangerous angle. The front door didn't lock properly. It just swung open when Dalton pushed it. "This way," Brielle said quietly, leading him up a narrow staircase. The stairs creaked under their weight. The hallway smelled like mildew and old cooking grease. A single bulb flickered overhead, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. Apartment 2F was at the end of the hall. Brielle pulled out a key tied to a string around her neck. Her hands shook as she unlocked the door. "Mom," she called softly. "I'm home, and I brought someone to help." The apartment was tiny. One room served as kitchen, living room, and bedroom all at once. A couch with a pull-out bed dominated the space. The air inside was cold, colder than outside. And on that pull-out bed lay Corinne Ashford. Dalton's breath caught. She was frighteningly thin. Her skin had a grayish tone that made her look almost transparent. Dark circles ringed her eyes. Her hair was damp with sweat despite the cold. When she heard footsteps, Corinne tried to sit up. "Brielle, I told you not to—" She couldn't finish. Her arms gave out and she fell back against the pillow, gasping. Brielle rushed to her side immediately. She moved with practiced precision, adjusting the pillow behind her mother's head, pulling the thin blanket higher, reaching for a glass of water on the nightstand. "It's okay, Mom," Brielle said in that too-adult voice. "He's going to help us. I promise." Corinne's eyes finally focused on Dalton standing in the doorway. Fear flashed across her face. "Who are you?" she asked weakly. "Brielle, what did you do?" "Mrs. Ashford," Dalton said carefully, stepping into the apartment. "My name is Dalton Merrick. I found your daughter on Route 47 tonight. She asked for help." Corinne's face crumpled with shame. "Oh, God. Brielle, you didn't. You weren't supposed to." "Mom, you're getting worse," Brielle's voice cracked. "You couldn't even sit up yesterday. I had to do something." Corinne reached out with a trembling hand and touched her daughter's cheek. "Baby, I'm fine. I just need rest. This man needs to leave. We don't need—" A violent cough cut her off. It racked her entire body. Deep, wet, painful. She grabbed the blanket and pressed it to her mouth, her whole frame shaking. Brielle held her mother's shoulders, steadying her, like she'd done this 100 times before. When the coughing finally stopped, Corinne lay back, exhausted. Her breathing was shallow and labored. Dalton looked around the apartment with new eyes. Bills stacked on the tiny kitchen counter, all stamped red. An empty refrigerator with its door slightly open. Medicine bottles lined up on a shelf, most of them empty. A space heater in the corner that clearly didn't work. This wasn't just poverty. This was survival. Barely. "Mrs. Ashford," Dalton said firmly, "you need medical attention. Right now. We can't afford—" "I'm not asking about money," Dalton interrupted. "I'm telling you that your daughter is terrified, and she has every right to be." Corinne's eyes filled with tears. "I don't have insurance. I lost my job. The clinics are backed up for months. I've tried. Another coughing fit seized her. This time it didn't stop. Corinne's face turned red, then almost purple. She couldn't catch her breath between coughs. Her hands clutched at her chest. "Mom!" Brielle screamed. Dalton moved without thinking. He pulled out his phone and dialed. "Don't," Corinne gasped between coughs. "Hospital. Too expensive. Can't." But Dalton was already speaking into the phone. "Vincent, it's Dalton. I need you. Now." He gave the address and hung up. Brielle looked at him with desperate hope. "Who's Vincent?" "A doctor," Dalton said, "and he owes me a favor." Corinne finally stopped coughing. She lay against the pillow, completely drained, breathing in short, painful gasps. She looked at Dalton with exhausted eyes. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. Dalton knelt beside the bed so he was at her eye level. "Because," he said quietly, "I know what happens when nobody stops." Brielle grabbed his hand suddenly. Her small fingers wrapped around his like she was afraid he might disappear. "Please don't leave," she whispered. Dalton squeezed her hand gently. "I'm not going anywhere," he promised. Vincent Hale arrived 30 minutes later. He was a tall man in his 50s with kind eyes and a worn medical bag. He didn't ask questions, just got to work. While Vincent examined Corinne in the main room, Dalton stood with Brielle in the tiny kitchen area. "How long has she been like this?" he asked gently. Brielle stared at the floor. "It started about a year ago. She got tired a lot. Then she started getting sick more. Then," her voice got smaller, "then she couldn't go to work anymore. And your father." Brielle's jaw tightened. "He left 2 years ago. He took the savings, left us with bills I don't even understand." "What about your mother's family?" "They live in another state. Mom called them once. They said they couldn't help right now." Brielle looked up at Dalton with those ancient eyes. "That was 8 months ago." Dalton felt anger burning in his chest, not at the child, at every adult who had failed her. "So you've been taking care of everything," he said quietly. Brielle nodded. "I learned how to cook easy things, soup, sandwiches. I remind Mom to take her medicine. I make sure she drinks water. Her voice broke slightly. "I pretend everything's okay at school when teachers ask questions." "Brielle, I'm not trying to be brave," she interrupted. tears filling her eyes. I'm just trying to keep her alive, that's all. Just alive. From the other room, Vincent called out, "Dalton." "A word." Dalton walked over. Vincent pulled him aside, speaking in low tones. "Severe anemia, chronic respiratory infection, probably pneumonia developing. She needs immediate treatment, antibiotics, IV fluids, proper rest and monitoring. Can you do it?" "Here, with what I have." Vincent shook his head. "I can start her on medication tonight, but she needs follow-up care, lab work, proper diagnosis. I'll handle the costs." Vincent studied him. "This isn't your family, Dalton." "No," Dalton agreed quietly. "But that child has been carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. Someone needs to help." Vincent glanced at Brielle, who was watching them with desperate hope. "All right," he said finally. "I'll do what I can." 20 minutes later, Vincent had started Corinne on medication and given Dalton detailed instructions. As he packed his bag, he turned to Corinne. "Mrs. Ashford, you're very sick, but with proper treatment, you can recover. Do you understand?" Corinne nodded weakly, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. After Vincent left, Brielle climbed onto the bed next to her mother. Corinne wrapped weak arms around her daughter. "I'm sorry," Corinne whispered. "I'm so sorry you had to do all this." "You're going to get better now," Brielle said firmly. "Right?" Before anyone could answer, Dalton's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Stay out of things that don't concern you." Hours later, Brielle had finally fallen asleep on the couch, still clutching her backpack. Corinne was resting more peacefully now, the medication beginning to work. Dalton sat in the small kitchen area, staring at the threatening text on his phone. "Who are you, really?" Corinne's weak voice startled him. She was awake, watching him from the bed. "Just someone who stopped," Dalton said. "No," Corinne whispered. "People don't just do all this. You have money, connections. Private doctor who comes in the middle of the night." She paused. "And someone's threatening you because you helped us." Dalton was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. "I had a sister," he said quietly. "Elise. She was 15 years younger than me. I practically raised her after our parents passed." Corinne listened silently. "When she was 19, she called me one Tuesday night, October 15th. It was raining." Dalton's voice got distant. "She said she needed to talk, that something was wrong. But I was in a business meeting, building my company, making my fortune." He stopped. "I told her it could wait until tomorrow." The silence that followed was heavy. "The next morning," Dalton continued, his voice barely above a whisper, "I got a call from the hospital. Elise had taken too much of her anxiety medication. The doctors said it was accidental. She'd been struggling for months and I never noticed because I was too busy." Corinne's hand covered her mouth. "She didn't leave a note, she didn't mean to. She just needed help. And I wasn't there." Dalton finally looked at Corinne. "If I had stopped, if I had just listened for 5 minutes, she'd still be alive," Corinne finished softly. Dalton nodded. "I built an empire after that, made millions, but none of it mattered because I'd lost what was actually important." "And then you saw Brielle," Corinne said, "standing in the rain, asking for help, looking exactly like—" Dalton's voice broke, "like someone who'd been ignored for too long." Corinne wiped tears from her eyes. "You can't bring her back by saving us," she said gently. "I know," Dalton replied, "but maybe I can honor her memory by not making the same mistake twice." He looked at Brielle sleeping peacefully for the first time in who knows how long. "That little girl has been screaming for help in her own way," Dalton said, "working herself to exhaustion, standing in the rain hoping someone would stop. And I did stop, so now I have to see this through." Corinne smiled weakly. "You're a good man." "No," Dalton corrected. "I'm just a man who learned too late that people matter more than everything else." His phone buzzed again. Another text. "Last warning." Dalton turned off his phone and stood up. "Get some rest, Mrs. Ashford. Tomorrow we start fixing this." Morning sunlight streamed through the apartment's cracked window. For the first time in months, Corinne was sitting up in bed, color returning to her cheeks. The medication was working. Brielle couldn't stop smiling. "You're sitting up, Mom! You're actually sitting up!" Corinne laughed weakly. "I feel a little better, sweetheart." Dalton had returned with groceries. Real food, not just cheap canned goods. Fresh fruit, bread, milk. Things Brielle hadn't seen in their kitchen in forever. "This is too much," Corinne protested as Dalton unpacked bags. "It's barely anything," Dalton replied. "Vincent will be back this afternoon for a follow-up. He's also arranged lab work at a clinic downtown, no charge." "I can't let you—" "Mrs. Ashford," Dalton interrupted gently. "Please, let someone help for once." Corinne's eyes filled with grateful tears. Over breakfast, Brielle actually giggled at something Dalton said. It was the sound of a child being a child. Light, carefree, beautiful. Dalton felt something warm in his chest. Something he hadn't felt in 15 years. Purpose. Later that afternoon, Vincent returned. After examining Corinne, he pulled Dalton aside. "She's responding well to treatment," Vincent said. "But this isn't a cure, Dalton. This just buys time. She needs consistent care, proper nutrition, and probably months of recovery." "I understand. Do you?" Vincent's expression was serious. "Because someone's clearly unhappy about your involvement. That text last night wasn't random. I can handle it." "Can you? Because helping this family might cost you more than money." Vincent lowered his voice. "People in your business circles won't understand this. They'll see it as weakness, a liability." Dalton glanced toward the apartment where Brielle was helping her mother eat soup. "Then let them think I'm weak," he said firmly. Vincent sighed. "You're a stubborn man." "So I've been told." Before Vincent left, he turned back. "You know this doesn't fix everything, right? Even with treatment, there's still the rent, the bills, the debt collectors. You can't solve poverty with good intentions." "I know," Dalton said quietly, "but I can give them a fighting chance." That evening, Dalton paid 3 months of back rent directly to the landlord. He left emergency cash in an envelope on the kitchen counter. He made sure the space heater was replaced with one that actually worked. As he prepared to leave, Brielle ran up and hugged him quickly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for stopping." Dalton knelt down to her level. "You're very brave, Brielle. You know that?" She shook her head. "I'm just scared all the time." "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared," Dalton said. "It means you keep going even when you are." Brielle smiled. Dalton stood to leave, and his phone buzzed. Unknown number. "You were warned." He deleted the message and walked out. But as he reached his car, he saw something that made his blood run cold. A man standing across the street, watching the building. Watching him. 2 weeks passed. Corinne grew stronger each day. She could walk around the apartment now. She could laugh without coughing. She could be a mother again. Brielle returned to school with a new backpack, bright blue, filled with notebooks and colored pencils. She'd even made a friend, a girl named Sophie, who sat next to her in class. For the first time in forever, their tiny apartment felt like a home. Dalton visited twice a week, bringing groceries and checking in. He never stayed long, but his presence brought comfort. Everything seemed to be getting better. Then came the knock on the door. Corinne opened it to find 2 men in cheap suits. They weren't smiling. "Mrs. Corinne Ashford?" the taller one asked. "Yes." "We're here representing Hammond Collections Agency. You have outstanding debts totaling $8,400. We're authorized to begin repossession proceedings unless immediate payment is made." Corinne's face went pale. I don't understand. What debts?" The shorter man pulled out papers. "Credit cards, personal loans, medical bills, all signed in your name." "I didn't sign for any." Corinne stopped, realization hitting her. Marcus, her ex-husband, he'd taken out loans in her name before disappearing. "We don't care who signed them, ma'am. Legally, you're responsible. You have 1 week to pay or we begin legal proceedings. That includes eviction." Brielle appeared in the doorway, her school backpack on her shoulders. "How much?" she asked quietly. The men looked at her, surprised. "Excuse me? How much do you need?" Brielle repeated, her voice steady but her hands shaking. Brielle. No, Corinne started. 8,400, the tall man said with a cruel smile. You got that kind of money, little girl? Brielle walked to her room. She came back carrying the old worn backpack, the one from that rainy night. She opened it and pulled out what remained of her savings, $216. Here, she said, holding it out. It's all I have. Please take it and leave us alone. The shorter man actually laughed. Kid, this doesn't even cover the interest. But it's everything, Brielle's voice cracked. I worked so hard for this. I saved every penny, please. 1 week, the tall man repeated coldly. He handed Corinne official papers and walked away. The door closed. Corinne sank to the floor, overwhelmed. Brielle stood there, still holding the money, tears streaming down her face. I thought we were safe, she whispered. I thought everything was going to be okay. Corinne pulled her daughter close. It will be, baby. Somehow, it will be. But Brielle could hear the fear in her mother's voice. That night, alone in her room, Brielle opened the old backpack again. Inside, beneath the money, was her worn teddy bear, Mr. Buttons, the last toy from when life was normal. She held it tight, staring at it. Maybe someone would buy it, maybe she could find more work. Maybe if she tried harder, worked longer. A sound made her look up. Her mother was on the phone in the next room, voice breaking. Please, isn't there anything you can do? Any program, any help? A long pause. I see, thank you anyway. Corinne hung up and buried her face in her hands. Brielle squeezed Mr. Buttons tighter. They'd been so close to okay. So close. Brielle didn't tell her mother. She didn't tell Dalton. Instead, she started working again. Before school, she delivered flyers for Mr. Patterson's hardware store. After school, she babysat for Mrs. Rodriguez. On weekends, she collected returnable bottles from parks and parking lots. The old backpack grew heavy again. But not heavy enough. She had 5 days left. Corinne noticed the exhaustion first, the dark circles under Brielle's eyes, the way she fell asleep during dinner. Brielle, what's going on? Corinne asked one evening. Nothing, Mom, just tired from school. Don't lie to me. Brielle's face crumpled. The wall she'd built came crashing down. I'm trying to save us, she screamed. I'm trying so hard, but it's never enough. It's never enough. Corinne reached for her, but Brielle pulled away. I thought we were finally safe. I thought everything was going to be okay, but it never stops, Mom. The problems never stop. Tears poured down Brielle's face. I learned how to be an adult before I learned how to be a kid, and I don't know how to stop. Corinne's own tears fell freely now. Baby, you shouldn't have to. But I do, Brielle sobbed. Because if I don't, who will? You're getting better, but you're still weak. We don't have anyone else, it's just us. And I can't lose you. Corinne pulled Brielle into her arms, holding her tight despite her daughter's resistance. You won't lose me, Corinne whispered. I promise. You can't promise that, Brielle said, her voice muffled against her mother's shoulder. Nobody can. They sat like that for a long time, crying together. Finally, Corinne spoke. I'm calling social services tomorrow. Brielle's head snapped up. No, they'll take me away. They might help us, Corinne said firmly. I've been too proud, too scared to ask. But watching you destroy yourself to save me, that ends now. Mom, I would rather risk losing you to the system than watch you lose yourself trying to fix my mistakes. Corinne held Brielle's face gently. You are 9 years old. You should be worried about homework and friends, not debt collectors and medicine. But what if they take me away from you? Corinne's voice broke. Then at least you'll be safe, fed, cared for, even if it breaks my heart. I don't want to be safe without you, Brielle whispered. I know, baby, I know. That night, Brielle couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, thinking about everything. The backpack with money that wasn't enough. Mr. Buttons, who nobody would buy. Her mother, who was willing to let her go to keep her safe. And Dalton, who had stopped once but might not stop again. She was so tired of being strong, so tired of being scared. In the darkness, Brielle whispered to herself, Please, somebody, I can't do this anymore. Nora Brennan arrived the next afternoon. She was a social worker in her 40s with warm eyes and a professional manner. She carried a folder and a kind smile. "Mrs. Ashford, thank you for calling," Nora said, sitting at their small kitchen table. Corinne gripped her coffee cup tightly. Brielle sat beside her, silent and tense. Nora reviewed their situation carefully. The medical crisis, the lost job, the mounting debts. Then she started going through old paperwork Corinne had saved in a cardboard box. Medical bills, rejection letters, insurance documents. Nora's expression changed. "Mrs. Ashford," she said slowly, "when did you lose your health insurance?" 14 months ago, when I was let go from the grocery store." Nora pulled out a document. "And did anyone explain your eligibility for state medical assistance?" I tried applying, but the forms were so confusing and I kept getting rejected." Nora studied the papers more closely. Her jaw tightened. "These forms were filled out incorrectly," she said. "And look here, this signature, is this yours?" Corinne leaned forward. Her face went pale. That's not my signature." "Are you certain?" "Positive. I would never. The address is wrong too." "That's not where we lived." Corinne's hand started shaking. "Marcus, he must have—" Nora's expression hardened. "Your ex-husband had access to these documents?" "He handled the finances. Before he left." Corinne's voice rose. "He sabotaged us. On purpose?" Brielle's eyes went wide. "Daddy did this?" Nora continued searching. She found more inconsistencies, false information, forged signatures. Marcus had deliberately blocked Corinne's access to benefits she desperately needed. Corinne stood up abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. "I could have gotten help?" Her voice shook with rage. "This whole time, Brielle suffered because I trusted him?" She slammed her hand on the table, something Brielle had never seen her mother do. "He knew what would happen. He knew we'd struggle. He did this to hurt me, and he hurt our daughter instead." Tears of fury streamed down Corinne's face. Brielle sat frozen, processing this revelation. All those nights hungry. All those times scared. All that work for money they desperately needed. It wasn't just bad luck. Someone had done this to them on purpose. Nora spoke calmly, but firmly. "Mrs. Ashford, we can fix this. Legally. We can file fraud reports, reverse the sabotage, and get you enrolled in the programs you should have had access to all along." "How long will that take?" Corinne demanded. "Weeks, maybe months. We have 5 days before eviction." Nora nodded seriously. "I know. But there are emergency funds for situations exactly like this. Housing assistance, food programs, medical support." She looked at both Corinne and Brielle. "But it's going to require courage from both of you. You'll need to face officials, answer hard questions, and trust a system that already failed you once." Corinne looked at Brielle. Brielle looked back at her mother. "Can we really fix this?" Brielle asked quietly. Nora met her eyes. "Yes, but not overnight, and not alone." Corinne took a shaky breath. "Then let's start." The next week was a blur of paperwork and appointments. Nora guided them through everything: benefit applications, legal aid consultations, emergency housing assistance. But Brielle was skeptical. She'd heard promises before. She'd watched adults say, "We'll help," and then disappear. When Nora scheduled a meeting with a school counselor, Brielle didn't show up. Mrs. Petra Hollis found her sitting alone in the library after school. "Brielle, you missed our appointment." Brielle didn't look up from her book. "I was busy." Petra sat down across from her. "With what?" "Just stuff." "Talk to me." Brielle finally looked up, eyes blazing. "Every time an adult says we'll help, things get worse. My dad said he'd take care of us. He left. The hospital said they'd work with us. They sent bills we couldn't pay. People promise and nothing changes. Why would this time be different?" Petra didn't offer empty reassurances. Instead, she asked, "What would it take for you to believe?" Brielle blinked, surprised. "What? What would prove to you that this time is real?" Brielle thought hard. "I need to see something actually change, not promises, change." Petra nodded. "Then let's make small changes you can see, one at a time. Deal?" Brielle hesitated. Deal. Over the next few days, small victories appeared. The landlord agreed to freeze eviction proceedings while emergency housing assistance was processed. One of the fraudulent debts was officially canceled by court order. Corinne got a follow-up appointment at a free community health clinic. Each tiny change chipped away at Brielle's wall of distrust. In her counseling sessions, Brielle finally started talking. "I'm scared all the time," she admitted to Petra one afternoon. "Scared Mom will get sick again. Scared we'll lose our home. Scared that being happy means something bad is coming. That's called waiting for the other shoe to drop," Petra said gently. "Yeah, exactly." Brielle's voice got small. "What if I let myself believe everything's okay, and then it all falls apart again? Then you'll handle it just like you've handled everything else." Petra leaned forward. "But Brielle, you don't have to handle it alone anymore. That's the real change." Brielle's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to not be alone," she whispered. "Then we'll teach you," Petra said, step by step. That week, Dalton visited with groceries as usual. But this time, instead of just dropping things off, he stayed for dinner. He taught Brielle a card game. They laughed when Corinne won 3 rounds in a row. It felt normal, like a family. Later, as Brielle got ready for bed, she pulled out her school notebook. She'd been assigned an essay, "A moment that changed your life." She stared at the blank page for a long time. Then she wrote the title, "The Day I Stopped a Car." For the first time, she was ready to tell her story. The debt collectors returned 1 week later, but this time, everything was different. When they knocked, Corinne stood tall and opened the door with Nora on speakerphone. "Mrs. Ashford, we're here for—" "I know why you're here," Corinne interrupted firmly. "And I have something to tell you." She held up official documents. "These debts were fraudulently signed in my name by my ex-husband. Here are the court documents proving fraud. Any further collection attempts will be considered illegal harassment and will be reported to the State Attorney General's office." The taller man's confident expression faltered. "Ma'am, this call is being recorded." Nora's voice came through the phone clearly. "I'm a licensed social worker and witness to this conversation. Do you wish to continue?" The men exchanged glances. "We'll need to verify this with our office," the shorter one said. "You do that," Corinne said, "and don't come back without proper legal authorization." She closed the door. Brielle stared at her mother in awe. "Mom, you were amazing." Corinne's hands were shaking, but she smiled. "I was terrified, but I'm done being scared." That moment changed something in Brielle. If Mom could stand up to them. 2 days later, Brielle's school held a community evening, an event where students could share creative work. Brielle had finished her essay. She'd read it privately to Mrs. Hollis, who'd cried and asked, "Would you be brave enough to share this with others?" Now, standing backstage, Brielle's heart pounded. "You don't have to do this," Corinne whispered, holding her hand. "I want to," Brielle said. "I need to." When her name was called, Brielle walked to the small podium. The audience, parents, teachers, students, waited quietly. Brielle's hands shook as she held her paper. "My essay is called The Day I Stopped a Car," she began. Her voice was quiet at first, then stronger. She told her story, not all the details, not the painful parts, but the truth of it. About being scared. About working hard for something that seemed impossible. About standing in the rain because she didn't know what else to do. About someone who stopped and listened. In the audience, a woman wiped tears from her eyes. A man put his arm around his young son, holding him closer. When Brielle finished, there was silence, then applause. Not polite applause, real, genuine appreciation. Afterward, people approached her. "You're so brave," one mother said, pressing $20 into Corinne's hand. "For your family." A local business owner offered Corinne a part-time position. Flexible hours, health benefits. A teacher hugged Brielle. "Thank you for reminding us to really see the children in our classrooms." But then, standing at the back of the room, Brielle saw someone who made her freeze. A man. Watching. With a familiar face she'd tried to forget. Her father. Marcus was here. Marcus showed up at their apartment the next evening. He arrived with cheap flowers and a practiced smile. "Corinne, baby, can we talk?" Corinne stood in the doorway, blocking his entrance. "What do you want, Marcus?" "I heard about everything. About Brielle's speech. About how you got help." His tone was smooth, friendly. "I'm proud of you, really. And I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me. You need to leave." Wait. Hear me out." He shifted his approach, looking past her to where Brielle stood frozen. "Hey, Brie, look how big you've gotten. I missed you so much, sweetheart." Brielle didn't move. Marcus's smile didn't waver. "I know I made mistakes. Daddy messed up. But I'm here now to make things right. We're still a family, aren't we?" "You left us," Brielle said quietly. "I know, and I'm so sorry. You made it so Mom couldn't get help." Brielle's voice grew stronger. "You signed papers that weren't yours. You hurt us on purpose." Marcus's friendly mask slipped slightly. "Sweetie, you don't understand adult situations." "I understand perfectly," Brielle interrupted, stepping forward. "You're here because you heard things might be getting better for us. You want something. But you don't get to come back now and pretend you care." Marcus's expression hardened. "I have legal rights. I'm still your father. I could get a lawyer, fight for custody." "On what grounds?" a calm voice said from the stairwell. Dalton appeared, Vincent beside him. Marcus turned. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who did research," Dalton said evenly. "Marcus Ashford. 2 outstanding warrants in Nevada for financial fraud, 1 in Arizona for identity theft. The local police would be very interested to know you're here." Marcus's confident posture crumbled. "You're bluffing." Dalton showed him his phone screen, official documents, warrant information. Marcus's face reddened with anger. "You can't prove I did anything to them." "Actually," Nora said, appearing behind Dalton with a folder, "we can. Forged signatures, false information on state documents. It's all documented." Marcus looked around, trapped. His eyes landed on Brielle one last time. "You'll regret this," he said to Corinne. "All of you." "No," Corinne said firmly. "The only thing I regret is trusting you in the first place. Leave. Now." Marcus stormed past them down the stairs. When he was gone, Brielle's legs gave out. Dalton caught her, kneeling down. "Hey, you're okay. He's gone." "Will he come back?" Brielle whispered. Dalton looked her in the eyes. "Not him. But Brielle, listen to me. You're stronger than he is now. You faced him and told the truth. That took more courage than anything he's ever done." Brielle buried her face in Dalton's shoulder, finally letting herself cry. Corinne joined them, wrapping her arms around her daughter. They'd faced their biggest fear, and survived. Together. 3 weeks later, everything began coming together. Nora called with news. "The state approved your benefits: health insurance, temporary assistance, and housing support. The retroactive payments will cover all your legitimate debts." Corinne cried on the phone. "Really? All of it?" "All of it," Nora confirmed. The Brightside Family Initiative offered Brielle a full scholarship to their after-school program, tutoring, mentorship, and activities. Vincent's final medical report confirmed Corinne was in full recovery. "Continue the medication for 3 more months, and you'll be completely stable." For the first time in years, the future looked bright. One evening, after Brielle was asleep, Dalton sat with Corinne at their small kitchen table. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. Corinne set down her tea. "What is it?" Dalton pulled out an old photograph, a young woman with bright eyes and a wide smile. "This is Elise, my sister." He told Corinne the whole story, not just the ending, but the life before. How Elise loved painting, how she made everyone laugh, how she'd once helped a stranger change a flat tire in the rain. "She was everything good in the world," Dalton said, his voice breaking, "and I was too busy building an empire to see she was drowning." He stared at the photo. That Tuesday night when she called, she'd lost her job. Her boyfriend had left. She felt completely alone, and I said, "Can it wait until tomorrow?" Tears fell onto the table. The next morning she was gone, not on purpose. She just took too much medication trying to sleep. The doctor said if someone had been there, had noticed, she'd be alive. Corinne reached across the table, taking his hand. "If I had stopped once," Dalton whispered. really stopped and listened, she'd still be here. You stopped for Brielle, Corinne said gently. Because I couldn't save Elise, but maybe I could honor her by not making the same mistake twice. He looked at Corinne. Brielle reminded me that people matter more than anything else. She reminded me what my sister tried to teach me. Corinne squeezed his hand. Elise would be proud of you. I hope so. They sat in comfortable silence. Then Corinne's phone buzzed. A notification from the court system. Final custody hearing scheduled for next week. It was a formality. The state needed to officially confirm Corinne was capable of caring for Brielle without supervision. But seeing it in writing made Corinne's heart race. What if they take her anyway? She whispered. They won't, Dalton said firmly. You've done everything right, you're healthy, you have support, you're employed, they'll see that. The morning of the hearing arrived quickly. Corinne wore her best dress, simple but clean. Brielle wore her school uniform, freshly washed. They held hands outside the government building. I'm scared, Brielle admitted. Me too, Corinne said. But we're scared together this time. They walked inside. Together. The hearing misses. Calloway, a stern woman with gray hair and reading glasses, reviewed the file carefully. Mrs. Ashford, I need to understand your current situation. Medical status? Fully recovered. I have documentation from Dr. Hale. Employment? Part-time at Riverside Library. Flexible hours with benefits. Housing? Stable. Rent current with assistance from the housing program. Mrs. Calloway nodded, making notes. Then she turned to Brielle. And you, young lady, do you feel safe with your mother? Brielle looked at her mom, then back at Mrs. Calloway. She didn't use the answer she'd rehearsed. Instead, she spoke from her heart. My mom fought a sickness without medicine. She fought bills she couldn't pay. She fought someone who hurt us on purpose. Brielle's voice shook but stayed strong. She never gave up on me. Not when she was too weak to stand. Not when I thought she should. I'm safe because she stayed. Not because she was perfect. Not because she was strong all the time. Because she never stopped trying. Mrs. Calloway removed her glasses, visibly moved. The room was completely silent. She reviewed the documents one final time, then looked at both of them. Custody remains with Corinne Ashford. State supervision terminated. Case closed. Corinne gasped. Brielle threw her arms around her mother. They cried together. Tears of relief, exhaustion, and finally, hope. 6 months later, Brielle walked to school on a sunny morning. Her blue backpack filled with books and a framed photo of her and her mom smiling in their kitchen. The old backpack sat in her closet at home, not hidden in shame, but kept as a reminder of who she'd been and the strength she'd discovered. Corinne worked at the library, healthy and happy. She attended book clubs and made friends. Dalton visited every Sunday for dinner. No longer a stranger, but family. One evening, Brielle handed him something, the original note from her backpack. This is for Mommy's medicine. Don't let them take it. On the back, in her improved handwriting, she'd written, Thank you for stopping. You didn't save us with money. You saved us by listening. Brielle. Dalton read it, tears in his eyes. Thank you, he said quietly. You reminded me why stopping matters. Brielle smiled, a real child's smile. Final words. The camera pulls back from their lit apartment, laughter echoing inside. Thousands of children grow up too fast, not by choice, but because life doesn't wait. Illness, poverty, betrayal. They accumulate in silence. Systems fail. Adults look away, but sometimes someone finally stops. Someone listens. And everything changes. Not with money, not with power, but because one person saw another's pain and refused to keep driving. Sometimes the bravest thing is simply staying. And sometimes the bravest thing a stranger can do is stop. The end.